Welcome to MMAPlay365, I'm Newsome and I'm here to give you a base AI recap from our UFC prediction software at MMAPlay365 from last weekend's event at UFC London. Overall, the straight pick prediction accuracy was 60%. It's a little bit lower than what it has been recently, but there was 15 fights overall, so there was a lot of fights. I believe it was 9 out of the 15 that base AI got correct, and there was a couple of shocker results as well, so from the straight pick prediction accuracy, it was okay. Like I said, we've had 77% a couple of times and 80% over the last few weeks as well. So we've had a couple of real high scoring weeks. This week was a little bit lower, but still within the okay range. And like I say, these events are going to happen from time to time. If the worst that we're hitting 60%, then, and it doesn't happen too often, then yeah, I'm happy. But there were some good individual fights and individual picks from base AI, and we're going to jump right into them now. So the first one from a value perspective, we've got Mick Parkin making his UFC debut versus Jamal Pogues. Now, Parkin was a fighter I knew was going to win this fight. You know, I knew more about Parkin than it seemed a lot of people did know. That I heard analyse the fight, and look, it's just because I know the UK MMA scene really well. But one thing that base AI have always credited for is these newcomers, these debutants. Base AI tends to do a really good job predicting correctly new debutants into the UFC, fighters fighting for the first time in the UFC, and it's quite impressive really. Now, Parkin to win, base AI had at 58.35%. Now, there's a reason why I haven't rounded that down, which I normally do round up and down, and I'll go into that in a minute. But at 58.35%, the odds implied there is minus 138. So base AI was suggesting that Parkin should have been a slight to moderate favourite in the fight, but actually Parkin was anywhere between plus 120 to plus 145. The line did move up and down throughout fight week, so depending on where you got the line depends on how much value you got. But me personally, I think I bet him at plus 130, so I was pretty much smack in the middle of that. But either way, even if you took the worst line at plus 120, you still got super value, as base AI predicted an underdog to win the fight and said that the underdog should have been a favourite. And that's great. That's what we like to see. And like I said, a UFC debutant, so with the data that the AI is providing, it's incredible that it does a good job more often than not with these UFC debutants. Now, just moving into one step further and Parkin inside the distance. So you add the KO, the TKO and the submission together and you get Parkin to win by finish or inside the distance, however the market is displayed at your bookie. Inside the distance was 58.33%, so there's only a 0.02% difference between inside the distance and the win. Now, normally with this type of difference, you would be saying, well, look, Parkin to win inside the distance is going to be the better bet because there's only a 0.2% difference. However, the one counter that I would say is you do have to be careful about this sometimes. And look, even though it was a heavyweight fight, both fighters were relatively low volume. They weren't super power hitters. So if you actually watch tape on this as well, you would have seen that the fight could have played out very point scoring style. And that's exactly what happened. Now, if you'd have bet Parkin as the favourite and then you get inside the distance at plus money, then yeah, I'd be saying take the shot on inside the distance. But when you're already getting decent plus money on Parkin to win outright, I wouldn't always suggest going down the route of inside the distance or picking a prop or a method of victory or whatever. I would just say, look, you've got your plus money on the fighter to win outright, take the bet and run. And if you'd have done that, then obviously you got the cash ticket. If you had been a little bit greedier and gone for inside the distance, you would have fell short. But ultimately, from a value pick from base AI, real good job on Mick Parkin. Next up, we've got Paul Craig versus Andre Muniz. Now, although this is in the value section of the podcast of the recap, it is one of those that's an incorrect prediction. But again, if you play the value, sometimes you play the fighter that base AI isn't predicting to win. So what I mean by that is, look, Paul Craig was 45% to win from base AI. So it's almost a coin flip, but base AI technically is siding with Andre Muniz. Now at 45%, the odds implied there is plus 122. So base AI is saying that yes, Paul Craig should be an underdog, but only a very slight underdog. However, if you'd have bet Paul Craig at the bookies, you'd have got anywhere from plus 175 to plus 195. So that's where the value starts to appear. If you're using Bayes AI from a value perspective to get an edge over the bookies, you wouldn't have bet Andre Muniz. You'd have actually picked against Bayes AI and just used the math and the numbers alone and bet Paul Craig to win. And that is the reason why that is a good value bet on Paul Craig, because Bayes AI is saying that he should only be plus 122, but you're actually getting up to plus 195. So there's a lot of value there. Now, again, inside the distance, and I know this sort of contradicts what I've just said about the Mick Parkin fight beforehand, but if you were wanting to be a little bit greedier, then Craig inside the distance was 44%. So there was only 1% or just slightly less than 1% difference between Paul Craig to win outright and inside the distance, obviously adding the KO, TKO and submission together. And 44% odds implied is plus 127. If you'd have bet Craig to win inside the distance, you'd have got plus 300, so you'd have got a nice betting line, and of course that'd have cashed as well. The only thing that I will say is Bayes AI did favour the submission over the KO, and obviously Paul Craig finished with ground and pound on the mat, couldn't get the submission, finished him with ground and pound. So if you'd have picked the submission outright and been even greedier than the first two tiers, then yes, you would have had a losing betting ticket. But for the most part, there was value on Craig according to Bayes AI, and there was value on Craig inside the distance as well. Both came through, and in my opinion, a great value prediction from Bayes AI. Next up, we've got Julija Stoliarenko versus Molly McCann. So again, just like Paul Craig, this falls into an incorrect prediction from Bayes AI, but a prediction that still had a lot of value. Stoliarenko to win was 44%. So again, a near coin flip. Technically, Bayes AI's picked McCann, but again, if you're using math and numbers and you're using calculations to get an edge over the bookies, then this is another bet for you, because at 44%, the odds implied on that number is plus 127. If you'd have bet Stoliarenko, you'd have got anywhere from the plus 300 opener. She closed at around plus 170, so a ton of money did come in on her, but anywhere from plus 300, you'd have got plus 280, plus 250, plus 220, plus 200, plus 190, plus 180, plus 170. You get where I'm going. You'd have got a range of numbers. So the quicker you're better, the better. But still, even if you're better at the closing line at plus 170, there was value from what Bayes AI is saying that she should have been plus 127. Now, if you're looking to go a little bit further into the numbers that Bayes AI has provided for this fight, Stoliarenko's submission was 36%. Now, you probably wouldn't have gone inside the distance because the knockout was like, I think it was something like 0.06%. So the submission, it was basically, if Stoliarenko wins, it's going to be by submission. It was a very high percent. There's only 8% difference between Stoliarenko outright and the submission. So if you did want to be a little bit greedier and go for a specific method of victory, then Stoliarenko to win by submission, 36%. Odds implied on that is plus 178, and you'd have got plus 350 at the bookies. So you've still got value on the submission. Now, where it gets a little bit interesting with this as well is we can go one step further. So Stoliarenko to win by submission in round one. Now, without rounding up or down, the Stoliarenko submission outright was actually 36.49%. Odds implied plus 178, like I've already mentioned. Stoliarenko to win by submission in round one was actually 36.48%, so there's only a 0.01% difference between the submission and the submission round one. So technically, if you wanted to be super greedy, you're still looking at around a plus 178, plus 177 line for the submission in round one, but you're actually getting plus 750 at the bookies. So it's almost how you perceive the fight and how you want to bet it, because Bayes AI was saying that, look, if Stoliarenko wins, it's going to be by submission, very confident in that. But if she wins, it's absolutely going to be in round one by submission, otherwise she isn't going to win and the submission won't come. So you're getting a plus 750 line on that as well, and all three came in, again, in regards to value, because like I said, technically it was an incorrect prediction from Bayes AI, but the Stoliarenko win on the money line had a ton of value, the submission had a ton of value, and the submission round one had a ton of value as well. So yeah, a good prediction. Like I said, even though it was slightly incorrect, it's a really good prediction from that value perspective, using math, using numbers, using calculations to beat the bookie and get an edge over the bookies as well. So solid prediction in my opinion, again, from Bayes AI. Now we're moving into the winners section, and we're going to start with Daniel Marcos versus Davey Grant. Now, first and foremost, personally, I thought Davey Grant won the fight. I'd have to watch it back though, because Marcos did seem to land the more cleaner strikes, the strikes that actually landed, but I still think watching it live, Davey Grant won, and I bet Daniel Marcos as well, by the way, so it's not like a weird bias take on the fight. But from BZI's perspective, Daniel Marcos to win, BZI said, was at 59%. At 59%, the odds implied there is minus 144. Now, if you wanted to bet Marcos, you could have got anything from minus 120 to minus 150, it seems. Obviously, as soon as you surpass minus 144, so you go to minus 145 or minus 150, then you've lost value on the line. But if you bet it early, like I did at minus 120, then you'd have got value, minus 130, minus 135. There's value there on Daniel Marcos to win outright. Now, another market as well, because listen, the gambling markets in MMA and the UFC are growing rapidly. They have been for years, and you can get some real good markets to bet on, markets that aren't available everywhere. Some bookies will have like little specials and try to get an edge over another bookmaker with a certain market. And one that stood out to me here with the Marcos fight is the market of knockout or decision, or KO/TKO or decision. So there is bookies I know in the UK that do have a submission or decision or a knockout or decision, and it's called double chance, at least here in the UK. So Marcos to win by KO or decision, so if you add the KO TKO percentage along with the decision percentage, you'd have got 53%. And at 53%, the odds implied is minus 113. Now, considering Marcos was anywhere from minus 120 to minus 150, I'm not actually 100% sure on what this line would have been, but I think you'd have been looking around a plus money number, in my opinion, because, again, especially early on, if Marcos is minus 120, the KO or decision has got to be lower than that. So you are probably going to be looking at maybe plus money. So if you wanted to get the plus money aspect, then you could look at different markets. And listen, this is what I've said about BZI. It gives you so many different possibilities and outcomes and percentages that can be added together and used to calculate value on different markets in MMA. You can really be creative with what you bet here. And Daniel Marcos' submission was a low percentage, so the KO or decision was very similar percentages. So why not put them together and look for a double chance KO or decision just to see if you can get any more value rather than the money line. So just something else for you to think about, just another way to use BZI creatively, but overall a solid winner and a solid prediction from BZI on Daniel Marcos. And just to wrap up some of the correct predictions from BZI before we finish the recap, and again, most of these don't have value from the percentage to the odds implied probabilities to then the odds that you get after you've got your odds implied probabilities, but still winners nonetheless. And the first one is Ketlen Vieira versus Pannie Kianzad. Vieira to win BZI had at 55%. Next fight, Makhmud Muradov versus Bryan Barberena. BZI had Muradov to win at 53%. And in the next fight, the controversial one of the night, Joel Alvarez versus Marc Diakiese. BZI did have Alvarez to win at 53%, and regardless of what you think of the outcome, personally, it should have been a no contest all day. But on paper, Alvarez won the fight. On the record, Alvarez won the fight, and BZI had Alvarez to win at 53%. Lerone Murphy versus Josh Culibao. Murphy to win, 53%, another winner. Then we've got Ziam versus Herbert. Ziam to win at 51%. Again, close to a coin flip, but technically a correct prediction. The fight after that, we've got Nathaniel Wood versus Fili. Wood to win, 55%. And of course, Wood did win eventually, having a solid third round. And then finally, the main event, Tom Aspinall versus Marcin Tybura. BZI had Aspinall to win at 61%. So overall, a good event at UFC London. I cannot wait to see the predictions from BZI for some of the huge, phenomenal, mega fights that we've got next weekend at UFC 291. There's always a ton of value and some great predictions on these big pay-per-view events from BZI. So again, if you are interested and you want to try out a package, they're as low as $4.99, or you can grab a monthly for $9.99 or grab a yearly for $100. But yeah, I can't wait for next weekend's event, and I can't wait to see the results that BZI churns out for all of those fights. And of course, we'll be back next week for another BZI recap from that phenomenal mega pay-per-view event at UFC 291. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.